Joining us from New York is Cornel West. He's a professor of religion and African American studies at Princeton University. He's also an author and a radio talk show host. Good to have you with us, Cornel. First of all, you talk a lot about poverty in this election. Do you think that either candidate has really focused enough on poverty?
Not at all. I mean, it's been very sad to see how neither Republican Party, Democratic Party, Mitt Romney, or Barack Obama have talked about the catastrophe of poverty. This election, we've seen $6 billion spent on this election, $2 billion for the presidential election, yet no serious talk about the fact that 40% of black children, 25% of all of America's children live in poverty. That's
well,
just
why is that, if I can jump
sad
in? With 46
spectacle.
million people in the U.S. now classified as living on the poverty line, you'd think poverty would be a big issue, wouldn't you?
You would think so. You know, Brother Tavis Smiley and I and Marion Wright Edelman and others have done all that we could. We've gone on tours. We've talked about it over and over again. But when it comes to debates, not a word. When it comes to public discourse among the presidential candidates, not a word. Why? Because they're obsessed with two states, Ohio, Florida. They're obsessed with one group, white, independent moderates. So poor of all colors, especially black and brown poor, red poor, invisible. It's a shame. It's obscene. It's morally profane.
Well, is it then more to do with the system than simply the candidates?
That's right. That's exactly right. That we in America now, we've had wonderful individuals in the country, but we're living under a system that is failing poor and working people. Capitalism is not working for poor and working people. It's just a fact. Martin King understood this very well before he was shot down like a dog. And we tend to build on that legacy and tell the truth, because we've got to either reinvigorate democracy or begin to slide down a slippery slope to autocratic rule and oligarchic rule in the economy.
When you talk about things like that, I mean, man, the U.S. is the world's only superpower. It promotes its values, its system around the world. Is the world being discerning in choosing the good parts from the U.S. system? How do you see the U.S.'s influence internationally?
No, I think that when you look at the best influences in America, you're talking about jazz, blues, Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, and others. They're as American as Mitt Romney, but they're a different kind of America. If the Americans see just a system and just see the Mitt Romney and others,
okay, other than America jazz and blues, Cornel, I mean, what about the free market system? What about the new democracies growing in this part of the world? I mean, many people looking towards the West, aside of jazz and blues.
No, but that's part of the question. Jazz and blues is about dealing with catastrophe. Look how New York responds to catastrophe, trying to keep the marathon alive. That's the rule of money, as opposed to blues and jazz, which is dealing with catastrophe in the form of compassion for the least of these, compassion for poor, compassion for working people. That's Martin King. That's the legacy. We either come to terms with that legacy or America goes under. It's just a fact, though, brother.
All right, now if we could focus a little bit perhaps on U.S. foreign policy as well as the economic system, do you think either candidate would strengthen the principles of human rights in U.S. foreign policy? And I'm sure you know what I'm getting at, things like drone attacks, things like rendition and black sites and so on.
No, I think unfortunately we saw in the debate there's very little difference between the two. We've seen both of them actually not just highlighting, but celebrating drones dropping bombs on people, often innocent people. No serious talk about Israeli occupation of Palestinians. No serious talk about the occupation of Tibet. No serious talk about Africa. Africa has not surfaced in one debate or in one public conversation. Crucial part of humanity. So we see, again, living in a world of make-believe in a very narrow bubble, and yet at the same time, here's a nation that is the most powerful nation in the history of the world.
So is the U.S. on an irreversible course towards militarization, for example, when it comes to Africa, when it comes to Asia? We've heard even Obama talking about the pivot towards Asia, which sounds like putting more military hardware in that part of the world.
Well, we've got the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is NAFTA on steroids, which is to say the opening up for capital and the confining of labor or working people, but it's never irreversible. Back to jazz and blues. As difficult as things are, it can be different. It's not inevitable, It's not irreversible. It can be different, but people have to have courage, tell the truth, bear witness, hit the street, go to jail, or die for justice.